Hi everyone, Ewan Campbell, career coach at Mile 90,000, and today I want to talk to you about values. Now, last time we spoke, I introduced the 5 key areas that you need to explore in order to identify your ideal job. And if you haven't watched that video, please watch it for context. It will really help with this one. And one of the 5 areas we looked at was your values, beliefs, and mission. And today I just want to explore that values piece and unpack that a bit more. So, what do we mean by values? What are values? Well, really, they're a fancy way of saying what matters to us in life, what's important to us in life. They are literally what we value. Now, the great thing about values and why we should care about them is when we honour them, we live our life kind of in accordance with them, we can feel incredibly alive and fulfilled. Conversely, when we fail to honour our values, we neglect them or ignore them, we can feel a bit de-energised and lost and like something is missing. So I'll give you an example. Let's say that one of your values is adventure or freedom, but then COVID-19 has hugely restricted the way that you typically honour those values. You used to go on holidays and travel, but that's been a lot more difficult. You may start to feel a bit de-energised and lost and like something is missing. Equally, let's say one of your values is connection, meaningful connection with others, but you work in a job where you sit behind a desk all day, behind a computer, and you never interact with anyone else. Or perhaps one of your values is self-discovery, but you feel like you haven't learnt anything new about yourself or grown in any way for years. So you kind of get my drift. Whatever your values are, if you fail to honour them, if you neglect or ignore them, you're going to feel a bit de-energised, a bit lost, like something's missing. And that's because it is. We're ignoring some stuff that's really core to us and really important. Now, if we look at this in a specifically work context, we can quickly see that some roles are going to be more or less suited to us depending on our values. So looking at the connection point again, if you really value meaningful connections with others, you're going to feel more alive and fulfilled and energetic on a day-to-day basis if you're in a role where you get to interact with others. That could be in a team, or it could be in a customer or client-facing role, but you probably shouldn't be in a role where you work in pure isolation. Likewise, if one of your values is freedom, chances are you're probably going to want to work in a more autonomous role where you have more control over your time, as opposed to one where your manager is checking in with you 3 times a day. In that situation, you're going to feel a bit trapped and caged in. Now, I just want to highlight, I'm not suggesting that we should try and honour every single one of our values with our job. That's not always possible, and depending on our values, definitely not possible. But we should try and honour some of them, I think, and certainly we shouldn't be in roles or career paths that actually antagonise our values or which step on them, and that really is not a recipe for success. So what do we need to do? How do we make this happen? Well, we need to identify what our values are, and this is one of the most important things I do as a career coach. I kick off a lot of coaching relationships. It's typically how I kick off all relationships, by identifying people's values, what really makes them tick, what is at their core, what's important to them. And the funny thing about values is that a lot of us intuitively feel like we know what our values are and that we know what's really important to us in life. But actually, when asked, we really struggle to articulate them. And this is really important, actually, because if we can't articulate them, then while on some level we might be aware of what our values are, kind of intuitively on a gut level, we're not consciously aware of them. And if we're not consciously aware of them, we're really going to struggle to identify when we're neglecting or ignoring them. Instead, we might just feel a bit de-energized, a bit lost, and we're going to then struggle to identify how to navigate out of that rut. Whereas alternatively, if we know consciously what our values are, we can articulate them, we'll be able to say, yes, it's that value of freedom that I'm really not able to honour right now because I can't go on holidays and travel. Maybe there are some other ways that I could honour this value of freedom in a different way. So to help you today, I want to introduce 3 questions so that you can start to identify your values today and get started with this. So the first question is, can you think of a moment when someone has said something that's really upset or annoyed you? Now, this is a really great question because when someone does something or says something that really upsets or annoys us, that's normally because one of our values is being stepped on or antagonised. And it may be that everyone else around didn't react at all and they were absolutely fine. And that's because none of their values have been stepped on or antagonised, it's just you. So think of that moment and try and recognise which value was being really antagonised when that person said that thing or did that thing. The second question is, can you think of 1 or 2 people who you really admire, who you really inspire you, and ask yourself, what is it about them that you really admire or that inspires you? Now, this is a really helpful question too, because the qualities that we admire in them are going to be the things that we think are important and that we value. So it's a kind of a reflection of what's really important to us when we're looking at these individuals. So have a think about what is it about them that really inspires you or you admire. And lastly, what is so important to you, what matters enough to you that you will take a stand for it? This is a great question because we're not going to take a stand for things that we don't really care about. We're only going to do it for things that we think really matter and that we really value. So think, what is it that you would defend in conversation or join a group for or take some sort of action for? Chances are this will be a value. So have a think about that. And I would really recommend as you answer these questions, write down your answers as opposed to just thinking about them, because once you've written them down, you can look across them and say, right, how can I connect the themes here? Which words are consistent across my answers? And perhaps also which words are really popping off the page to me? Which of these really resonate with me? These will be your values. Obviously, it's not a full diagnosis, it's just 3 questions, but you can really get quite quickly to identifying what your values are. Hopefully these questions can give you a way in. And the final question then to ask is, looking at my current role or job, how much do I get to honour these values? Ideally, hopefully if you enjoy your role, you should be honouring some of them. Perhaps if you're not enjoying your role at the moment, you may be finding that you are actually antagonising. The job antagonises some of those things that are really core to you. This is really important to identify. Brilliant, well I hope that's been helpful, a little introduction into values, what they are and how to identify them. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below, always love to hear that, and please follow, subscribe for more videos like this. Until then, I will see you soon.